one of you for turning out here tonight at St Mary's College, and for your willingness to share your stories with us.
Now, I'm well aware that some of the horrendous tales we've heard from others are only the tip of the iceberg. Great injustices have been carried out in huge numbers over the years, and so many of you have been left to deal with the pain and the grief and the death. Security forces, they have killed and wounded many and have never been held to account for their actions. So we hope that meetings like this will bring more people forward to speak, maybe for the first time, so that we can document and help you address these issues. Now, I know some of you are probably feeling a bit nervous, but everybody's here to support you. So if anybody feels they're ready to speak, would you like to come up onto the platform?
My name is Liam Quinn. My brother Frank Quinn. I was just 19 when he was shot dead by British soldiers on Internment Day. Catholic priest was shot dead and 10 others as well. They've all been forgotten, but my family can never forget. British Army murdered my brother and they said he was a gunman. My brother was no gunman.
I'd like to say a few words. My name is Janet Donnelly. It was Murphy at the time. My father was shot the same day by the same soldiers. Although my father didn't die right away, he had massive internal injuries throughout his whole body. He died at the age of 42. He died on my twin brother's 16th birthday. I only know bits and pieces of what actually happened to my father, but I'm here tonight to find out more about him and about these other families as well.
My name is Breach, and my mother was Joan Conley. She left our house to look for me and my sister on the morning of internment. There was a lot of confusion that day. We were just kids, and we wanted to go up to Springfield Park because we'd heard that loyalists were wrecking people's homes. And my mother, she came out to look for us, to take us home, and they murdered her. They shot her in the face, they blew her beautiful face to pieces with their bullets, and then the release statement said she was a gun woman. She was a 45-year-old mother of 8 in the press. He just released any statements by the army as the truth. I want people to know what really happened. I want people to know the truth.
My name's John Taggart. I was 11 and a half years of age when my dad was shot dead. He left our house to go and see if my sister and his brother were all right. He never came home again. He had 13 children. No one ever told us what happened except that he was shot. I want people to know what happened to my father and these other people. I want the world to know.
Well, look, I take it you all know each other.
No, I don't. Of course I've heard of all these other people, but I don't know them personally.
Right, well, can I suggest that maybe you exchange phone numbers? We'll try and contact numbers of other people who have been murdered or wounded. What do you reckon?
I'd like to do that. I'd be happy to speak to anyone who knows anything about what happened.
Help you upset. I think it's about 10 people knew what happened here.
Certainly, I've been trying to get post-mortem reports, coroner's reports, and anything else concerning my dad's death, but I feel like I'm just walking into a brick wall.
Well, maybe together we can get some answers. After all, it is 1987. They were all slaughtered in 71. I think it's time we found out everything. We put our cases to the public and then we show them what really happened.
After that night in 1997, we contacted every other person that lost loved ones. The relatives of Hugh Mullen, Frank Quinn, Josie Murphy, Joan Conley, Donny Taggart, Noel Phillips, Eddie Doherty, John Laverty, Joseph Core, Paddy McCarthy, and John McCarr.
Together with all the other relatives of the dead, we have written, demanded, begged, worked tirelessly. Post-mortem reports, forensic statements, laboratory reports. We have lobbied all over Ireland. We've been to Downing Street and we've even been to the Congress in America.
It's been 40 years since August 1971. 40 years, and tonight we're here because we're ready to show you and tell you our stories.
9th of August 1971. Loyalists from Spring Martin are wrecking Springfield Park and attacking homes. I'm now Bobby Clark. I'm going to try and help the people of Springfield Park get the Moyard where it's safer. Stand
Keep still! This is Father Hugh Mullen. I need to speak to your commanding officer. This is the third time I've called today. Look, this situation here is deadly. I've been up to Spring Martin and those loyalists beating people out of their homes. I've seen men with pistols firing at the crowds in the houses. Your soldiers are standing there and they're doing nothing to intervene. You must get them to stop these attacks. I have begged them to do something. This area is in complete chaos. But there's people trapped out in the waste ground. Men and women and children. I'm imploring you.
Jesus, it's the British Army that are doing the shooting. They're up there on the ridge of Spring Martin shooting down on the street below. That's definitely soldiers. It's the British Army, all right. There's a woman up on the line, big kids. There's a woman up on the line.
I'm going out to help them. Look, I'm carrying a white cloth. I'm leaving the house now. Please, I ask you, instruct your men to ceasefire. They're shooting innocent people. Come on, come on.
Keep still, men. For God's sake, keep still.
Okay.
I'm all right, Father. A fellow there's been shot.
Oh, Bobby, you're going to be okay. Look, I'm holding the ceasefire, and I'm going to get that ambulance. Bobby, I'm going to bless you. I'm not that far, I'm all right. It's going to be okay. In nominate Pam Brighton RIP. I'm going to get you home. I'm going to get an ambulance.
Jesus Christ! Father Holmes has been shot! Even the ambulance is in there, you're a priest! No, he's not dead, he's not moving! It ain't gonna attack him, man! He's not dead, he's not dying! We're the devil, not even my dog! Right, then I keep my hands up, I'll keep when I see him!
Stay down a bit.
Oh, you alright? Oh, Jesus Christ! Alright, now my father will get you in here, right? Oh, Christ! Jesus Christ, bitch, bring your head! Let's go back to the morning! You're not hurry! Let's go back! Quick, I go and jump and stop up, please! Oh, Jesus Christ! Stay down, please! No, stop it, Peter! We'll get you in here! We'll get you off! It'll be alright! Sweet Jesus Christ! Nobody else can help! Get it out, lads! Oh, Jesus, no!
Keep quiet.
no!
Stop shouting. We can't help the young fella now. What are you doing, mate?
I'm bleeding it!
I've been hit myself, but not badly. Listen, it'll be dark soon. Then we'll try and crawl into the field. Just stay calm.
Short time later, people are gathering near the grounds of the old manse. I'm now Desi Crone, who along with my best mate Josie Murphy, we're out looking at our teenage kids. Oh! Run! Yeah! Run! Did you see him, Josie? Oh! Run!
Get yourself to your family at our Alice's house and stay there. She's waiting on you. She'll be waiting second till you drop there, sir. You can't stay here. The bullets are flying through your windows. I don't want the lady worrying about her being pregnant, you hear me?
I don't intend to stand here dying. What about you?
Don't worry about me, sir. I'll be all right.
Right, well, we'll head on here. Like you said, Your pal will be worth sick of British.
I've never seen anything like this in my life, sir. There's hundreds of races.
Well.
Them houses and cops are street are wrecked.
Hey, what the hell are you doing? What's going on?
It's crazy up there. The bullets are flying everywhere. Come out, knock him out of here, Mother. Have you seen him? I'm sorry, I guess you haven't. Have you seen Josie's with that Thomas? No, Josie, I've seen no second behind him. Sorry. Sorry.
We're on out!
Let them out! Jesus, coming for that heroin.
Where do you ladies and gentlemen?
Might not be any business of yours.
That's not a very friendly action. We are engaged to protect you.
Protect us, my arse. Look there now. Is there firing rubber bullets and using gas and water cannons on a bunch of kids?
Hey, I'm throwing stones and paper on the lot.
Is there putting families out at the top of that street? You're not doing a thing to help. Them kids went up to help because you're not armed. Hundreds arrested, no Catholics.
What's on that?
What's yours, Jim Figgerly?
You're the fuck, you think?
Off the advertisement. What's the fence in the fake roads? Has a face like a well-scalped arse. Spitting at me, G.A.
Move on! Now!
Dude, you alright? It's crazy here. Here, Anna. You wouldn't know if the post office will be open in the morning, would you?
Jesus, I want that thing so low.
Sister Bell asked me to pick up the family, lads. The kids are breaking the curfew, you know. They better have some money in the house to buy some food.
Well, Daddy, if you're going to collect your family allowance, you better ask those shit-hot Brits for an armed escort, because you'd be worth a robbing.
Very funny,
How many
Josie.
kids have you in that?
13. And here, I'm going to be a grandpa again soon.
Jesus, on the kids you're down.
Anna, what the hell are you doing up here? I thought I told you to stay at home.
Listen, love. I landed on Harbridge, sneaked out the window the night. I don't go worrying about them down. They're only way up the
Here now,
Ballymurphy.
get down there and get home. And Joan, get me home too.
Here, hold on a minute, down train. Make the hard bone chin. You're not married to men going nowhere like Faye May Breeze.
Darling! Mom, we're walking on the big barn here. Try down to the big barn. Help out family, sir. Look, the crowds are lawless up there. Can't people are going overrun.
I just got down from her, Noah. There's no way to get back up again.
Tell you the truth, son, I think you should just go on home. I'm only out here looking for my two sons. You haven't seen them, have you?
Twins.
Twins.
Sorry, Mr. Murphy, I hadn't.
Boy, that's a nice jacket.
Thanks, mate. Get it from Mass Carlo. You've done a week for 40 weeks.
Hey, son. You're all right. You're all right, son.
Noah!
Ah! Jesus, oh, Jesus. Oh, my God. I'm not sick. Oh, my God. I'm blind. I can't
Joe!
see. Oh, my God.
Get down, Joe!
Oh, Jesus. What have you done? Oh, my God. I'm sick. Oh,
Joe, get down!
Help me, please. Please help me. Oh, my God. What have you done?
Joan! Joan! God, no. I'm not staying here. I'm getting no! Stay down! The dead fall, son! Their bosses just shot them! And we Joan Conley as well! No, son! You're staying right here! If you move, son, then I'll kill you! Then shut up, son!
Please help me! It's my leg! It's my leg! It's my thumb! There's a big hole in my thigh! Help me, Marty! I want my mommy! I want my mommy! You could be okay, Mom.
Daisy! I shot a kid! yourself, don't you worry. I'm gonna help you. You're alright. Joseph! You shouldn't move, Joseph! Jesus Christ! What are you? Split! Oh, what's pouring out of me? I'm gonna be sick. Fuck the glasses. Jesus, Joseph. See that? He's bleeding like a pig. No, son! You have to stay here! You don't understand that! Son! What are you doing? Here you go! I got me tight! Stay around, Tom! Get away! Where are you? Hey! Who are you doing? My name's Stuart Russell. I live in that house over there. I seen that kid being shot and that fella. And around here to see if I can help. Jesus, this felt shooting. Hold on. I'll keep that bastard quiet for all next time. Dirty fiend bastard. Filthy bastards. I can't believe what I just saw, sir. He wasn't there before. He is now. He just finished them off. Jesus Christ, the shooting stop. Gone away. I agree, come on. We better get out of here before they come back and finish this all off. I'm not staying here. You're fucking love on there!
This is the CEO of the British Army stationed here at Henry Taggart. You have 2 minutes to remove your wounded from the area. I repeat, 2 minutes only. My men will not follow until the 2 minutes are up.
Come on, you found her right. Is there anybody else there?
Let's go! Contact that one, Friday.
Hey, lads! Get ready for a fucking show!
Please! Please! I need a doctor! I'm sorry! Please! Oh, yeah! What the fuck? I get no! Mikey! Give me your name and all the names of your scummy. I'm not the fucking IRA. I'm in emergency, mate. Women screaming her head screaming off. And around right here to see if I can help. I'm winning under the face of body. And the soldiers come in and just excuse me. Excuse me. Unlikely, Rocky. What have you done? I had no guns. Nobody had any guns. Please, just check the fucking off. My ticket's in my pocket. Let me with you in my pocket. Please, can I get a doctor? Shut the fuck up! Check him over there.
Daniel Target. And look, be shut up over. Hey, boys! It looks like a fucking shit, doesn't it? I'm still fucking breathing. Can you believe that?
You, IRA bastard!
Yo, search his pockets. Oh, it's a fucking leprechaun! Fucking leprechaun!
Move! Move!
What? Oh, you dirty fucking bastard! Hey, Sarge! He's got a family around cookie as well. Hey, Sarge! What's he get for a charge on family allowance? Fuck me! This can't hear what's coming about that then fucking take then! Look at that bastard gets! The Irish, they like fucking rats. You're right, Sarge! Scum! They're fucking lot of them! Going on him! Over there! We'll put by the side of man. Dirty bastard! Hey guys! You look about the fucking door! Fucking move right now, move! What's your name, Paddy?
Can you get me a priest?
Fuck your priest! Fuck the priest!
My name is Joseph Murphy. I think I'm dying. Can you please get me a priest?
You're alright, mate. It's only a leg. I'll put a field dressing on it and try and stop it from bleeding. You don't need a priest. I'll get you to the hospital.
Get the fuck away from him! He's an Irish beaten bastard! Who the fuck do you think you are? Give me that rubber bullet. No problem, Sarge. One rubber bullet, then, Sarge. Here you go. Fucking do it! What are you doing, son? Fucking fucking walk through that! Lord!
George Russell was eventually taken to hospital, but that poor fella never fully recovered of the events that night. Frightened and physically ill from his wounds, he still had the bravery to make a very detailed statement, and what has proven to be a very accurate statement of the events that happened in the manse that night. In a strange twist of fate, George's younger brother Robert, who witnessed everything that happened in the manse that night, including the shooting and torturing of his own brother, would witness another shooting just a day later. As the morning of 10th of August dawned, word spread across the Ballymurphy area about what had happened. People soon realised that these paratroopers were not out just to arrest men, but to murder them. Pandemonium reigned throughout. So many men were missing. Families didn't know where their loved ones were, if they'd been shot, or arrested and interned, or were simply trapped somewhere and couldn't get home because of all the roads being barricaded and blocked. No one knew for sure, except for one family. I know was 19. He was a quiet young fella, kind of shy and very fussy about what he wore and how he dressed. He was a footballer too, Arnold, dead good at it. We'd go to the Romanos or the Astor's bar for a bit of dancing and music, when he had the night off work, of course. You see, Arnold was a good old grafter. He was a barman in the four-in-hand bar in the Lisburn Road, so most weekends he'd have to work. And he loved the group, the kinks and the small faces. That evening, Arnold would play cards with our Robbie and a few other fellas at the corner of the street. You see, my ma preferred to have him close to the house, because the air was real tense at the time. You could smell the CS gas in the air, hear gunfires every couple of minutes, the waves of sirens racing up and down the White Rock Road, breaking through barricades and chasing youngsters that were stoning them. Anyone who had a phone, well, their houses were jam-packed. Women out looking their men. There'd been so many arrests the night before. But Arnold played cards for about an hour or so. And he says to our Robbie he was going to take a dander down towards my yard to see what was happening. All these people being forced out of their homes. Maybe he could have given a helping hand. Our Robbie thought nothing of it. Because as I said, no one was quiet. He never brought any trouble to my ma's door. Then the night wore on, and dear God, it was frightening. The sound of gunfire from Corey's timber yard and the barracks was fierce. Rumours started coming in about different ones being shot. A priest, a woman. We didn't know what to believe. But I know nothing, Mum. My poor ma was going frantic. So I says I'd go and look for him, for she was a nervous type. She would have lost control. I searched high and low up and down the White Rock Road, and I know it was nowhere to be seen. So finally, I got the courage up to go up to that army barracks. And I asked at the gate if they'd arrested a young fella called Noel Phillips. And I swear to God, this soldier shouted down to me, "Fuck off and go check the morgue." Well, I thought I was going to faint. Not because he was cursing at me, but the way he was saying it, gloating, almost certain about what he was saying. The dirty scumbag. So I went over to that morgue. And there he was lying there, my younger brother, so small and so fragile, covered in a sheet. Telling my ma was devastating. Then we found out it wasn't even the bullet wound that killed my brother. Them bastards had shot my brother in the back of the head twice. Daisy Cronin and Jared Russell watched them drag his body into a field, bend him over, and shoot him in the back of the head twice. How could they get away with this? How? Then they returned to one verdicts and all these dead. These were murders, plain and simple. Everyone who died was shot in the back. But do you see my brother? He was executed in a field like a fucking beast.
Hugh had arranged for me and my mother to come and visit him on the 9th of August. But all this happened in the early hours of the morning, of the night. He rang me, and he told me under no circumstances to come near the area. That things were extremely bad. It was just too dangerous. So we waited anxiously all day to hear any news. Now, later that night it was reported that a priest had been shot in Ballymurphy. I knew straight away that it was Hugh. I knew in my heart and soul that it was my brother. Because that was Hugh's nature. He was a hands-on man. I made inquiries and my worst fears were confirmed. You know, I hadn't even the heart to tell my mother. So we asked the family doctor to break the news to her. I later learned from local people that the dead and injured lay in that field until dusk fell. Then an ambulance arrived. People come out from the houses to attend the injured and remove the dead. Hugh's body and the body of Frank Quinn were taken to a local house in Moyard. And people sat with them all night. Hugh didn't go into the priesthood early in life. It was a late vocation. We were a close-knit, working-class family from Portaferry. He loved sailing, the sea, and music. And when he left St Mary's School in Belfast, he went to work at sea for a year. Then he came home, and he told the family he felt he had a vocation, and he wanted to join the priesthood. So after many, many years at Maynooth, he was ordained. You know, the fondest memory I have of Hugh as a child was when this young lad, about 8 years old, was drowning in Strangford Lough. Hugh jumped in, fully clothed, swam about 60 yards, got a hold of the young lad, and dragged him back onto the shore. The young boy was unconscious, but a local doctor was there and was able to revive him. He had only been in Ballymurphy 6 months. he had been transferred from Dunloy. There he instigated the building of a new parish hall for the locals to use, and he came to Ballymurphy with the same attitude. He was appalled at the poverty and the high level of unemployment in the area. And he told me that it broke his heart. So he immediately tried to bring a better quality of life to his new parish. Him and like-minded priests, Father Wilson, Father Fitzpatrick, they went about setting up cooperatives and credit unions. They even tried to open a local knitting factory for local women to sell their wares. He didn't live in the big fancy parochial house away from his people. He lived just in a normal house in Springfield Park. The street he was murdered in. He lived among the people of his parish, and he died among his people. Shot in the back by the British Army. No one has ever been held accountable for Hugh's death. He was 39 years old.
What can I tell you about our Frank? My brother. He was good looking, I knew it. Always had one eye on the mirror. Couldn't pass one without checking himself out. Loved his clothes. He always made sure his Wrangler jacket and his jeans were spotless. Ben Sherman's shirts ironed to perfection. At the same time, he was full of devilment, terrible swagger. He wasn't too fond of school though, so every so often he used to mitch off and work on this fruit stall for this old fellow we knew down the market. Of course, the school board would find out and he'd get into real trouble with Mom and Dad with that. Didn't stop him though. A few weeks later, he'd be at it again. We lived over in Stranwell then. It's a small house, but lovely area. Mixed like what we got on with everybody. I used to say it was great that we could play and mix with people of all religions, so there was. Dad had building and repair work in all the houses in the area for this landlord developer guy. And that's how we got the house. So when Frank finished school, he just went and worked with Dad. We girls always loved Frank. To be all over. He was always generous with money too. Here's a few bob for you, our kid, he said. He'd throw you a few pounds. Then when he was 15, he met Anne. Lovely girl. And when they were 17, they got married and they moved into a wee house in Moyer Park and had the first wee baby there. God, he loved his life. Every Friday after work, us brothers and Dad, we'd meet up in Keenan's bar for a few pints, hop in the Graham's, the bookies, to put a few bob on the dogs. Great life. A simple life. Anne was pregnant again and our Frank was just over the moon. You see the day of interment? Well, Frank couldn't get to work because of all the trouble. Loyalists were attacking the top of Springfield Park and there was mayhem everywhere. People were running trying to get away, women and children carrying things. People were opening their doors, taking people in. Men went up to try and help them. There was gunshots. And then our Frank went up to help too. Then the shooting got really bad. Bobby Clark was shot first and then another man and then Father Mullen. I'd heard Frank talking about this priest, said he was really like a working man. He was more like he was a really good bloke, not like a priest. He went out into the waste ground where the people were lying and he had a white cloth. He had his back to the army. The army shot the priest. So our Frank decided for some reason that he'd put his hands up into the air and he'd walk out into the waste ground and see if he could help the wounded, maybe drag them to safety. And I think when he got there, Father Mullen was dead. Bobby Clark was wounded really badly, so Frank took the white cloth that the priest had been carrying, and he was bent over Bobby Clark, pressing the white cloth into his back. He had his back to the army. They shot him in the back of the head. Our Frank's lovely head. They found a single bullet from an Army SLR rifle in his mouth. But over in Stranmillis, my man and Dad were listening to the news reports, and they heard that a Catholic priest and what was believed to have been an IRA gunman had been shot dead. A man turned to Dad and said, "There's two mothers' hearts broke tonight." Little did she know it was her own heart. Oh, and then the army started with their lies. Oh, there'd been a big gun battle, and they'd shot an armed gunman. It was in all the reports, all the newspapers. Frank Quinn, gunman. Well, that nice area, Stranmillis, turned out not to be so nice after all. Oh, a few people came to the house to offer their sympathies and said, once you wouldn't have expected, and said they'd known Frank and that he wasn't like that. They knew it was all lies. Then the threat started and they had to move. They moved over to beside me in the new lodge, and the people there were really good to them. But the army made their lives hell. They just raided their house constantly. Well, shortly after that, Anne gave birth to a wee baby girl, and she called it Frances. I came out of the hospital that night and I sat on the wall and I sobbed my heart out. You know, it's not just the murder and the loss and the grief that you have to deal with. It's the lies that were told. The anger and the rage at those lies that eat at you down through the years. It's time for the truth.
My dad was a very easy going fella who loved kids, which is just as well because he had 13 of them. He worked for Northern Ireland Carriers and sometimes parcels would come in the sweets and Dad would accidentally on purpose drop a box. And he used to come home with loads of sweets for us. Anyway, his hair cut looking very smart. He went and he bought some food and brought it home to us. In case the trouble got worse and there was a shortage in the chest. He then went back up the chairs. They walked to the corner of Springfield Park and Moyard Park when a heavy burst of gunfire came into the street. My dad told her, get back to your house and get your family out of the houses right away. My dad then ran down Springfield Park, across the main road facing the army barracks. It was rioting going on and general disorder. We met Alan Breen, Lucy Murphy and Joe Conley. We were talking about the interment, the trouble, and had anyone seen any of their teenage kids? Then the Brits came out of the barracks. Willie Moore said, fuck! I think they're going to open up, let's get out of here! But that day did. A young lad called Noel Phillips started to run into the waistcoat of the old man's, and he was shot. The dad started to run as well, and he was shot. He fell and they kept on shooting into him. People saw it. They said his body was jerking as each bullet went into him. At his post-mortem they found 14 bullets in, all empty wounds through his back. That night was a terrible night. The dad didn't come home. He had never in his life stayed away from home. So our Alison and I went to the barracks and asked him, had we arrested a Daniel Taggart? And if so, where was he? They said they had no time for arresting last night, just for shooting. A man in our house went everywhere looking for him. Everywhere. Then a wee woman stopped him in the street. She said she was sorry. She heard Donny had been shot. She didn't know how badly, but he was definitely taken into the barracks. It was the third time. Our Alice and my man went to the barracks and Alice asked him, we just want to know where my daddy is. And those bastards started singing that song. That song, it was a big hit that year. Where's your daddy gone?
Where's your daddy go? Where's your daddy go? Where's your daddy go? Where's your daddy go?
They were taunting them. So Alice asked again. Said she knew her daddy was brought into the barracks. Oh yeah, that guy! Try no more! They were shouting all this at them from the front gate of the barracks. Some man heard it and very decently of them offered to drag them over to the leg and back morgue. Dad's body was lying naked on a table. Post-mortem said he was brought in without clothes. I often think that, you know. Dead, brutalized, after all he'd been through. And they left him in that state for my poor man's sister. Why, the Brits? The Brits said he was a gunman as well. Soldier A, B and C claimed they found 22 bullets in his pocket. Years later, the historical inquiry team seen them soldiers' statements. They had been altered to say Daniel Taggart. These phantom bullets were never produced. Neither were any of the clothes that he was wearing, or anything that he had in his pockets. The only bullets my poor dad was carrying was the 14 they put in his back.
Whenever I returned home and I found that my mummy hadn't returned to the house after going out to look for me, I wasn't even worried at first. But as the day wore on, my daddy got more and more anxious. So he went out himself to look for her. He asked Anna Breen where my mummy was the last time she saw her. And Anna said the last time she saw my mummy, she was standing at the corner of Springfield Park. She was worried too because her husband Dan hadn't returned home either. Darkness fell, the banging of bin lids filled the air, the noise of rats, sarts and screaming down streets. But above it all, a steady thud of shooting. Nobody really knew anything for certain that day. My daddy had had a bad heart attack that June, and I could see the strain on his face as every hour passed. People were talking and shouting to each other in the streets, saying that people had been shot, others injured, that the for sure Father Mullen was shot and he was lying in a field in Springfield Park. At this here stage, my father was frantic. So he went to a neighbour who had a phone. He rang every community centre, just every place he could think of where my mummy could have been sheltering. He then started to ring the hospitals, but he knew my mummy had no ID on her because she was wearing summer clothes. So every time he rang the hospital, he told them all about her bright red hair. And then there was this one hospital that my daddy rang, and the lady said that no one had been admitted that day with red hair as a patient, but that there was a lady in the morgue with red hair. My daddy went to the morgue with his friend Danny, and Danny said that my daddy just couldn't believe that the woman lying there with half of her face destroyed was his Joan. He refused to believe it. He had to be brought in 3 times to take it all in just to be sure that it was her. And I suppose in the end it was the bright red hair of hers that finally made him accept that the woman lying there was our mummy and his Joan. But Daddy, he was never the same again. None of us were. My mummy, she was the heart and the soul of our home. She had more energy than a dozen people. And do you know what her one big regret was? That none of her 8 kids had her bright red hair. See, the day we got a telegram from England telling us that her first grandchild had her red hair. Jesus, she danced up and down for joy, and we all fell about laughing because we could think of nothing worse than being a ginger. We ended up being sent away to a refugee camp in the Republic. So the most of us didn't even get to see my mummy being buried. And at night, my daddy would go to bed. He would turn his face to the wall and he would just cry and sometimes he would just lie there for days. But what made it worse were these soldiers saying that my mummy was a gun woman. One of the soldiers actually said that my mummy was carrying a brain gun that she was shooting at him. She jumped behind a tree trunk, popped back up and opened fire on him again. This is actually in one of the soldiers' statements. But do you see my mummy? My mummy was a 45-year-old mother of 8, wearing a skirt and summer sandals. The autopsy report, it said that the first shot entered the side of her face, just below her jawline, and it exited her eye. Her eyeball burst. And we know from witnesses that after this here shot, my mummy was staggering about crying that she couldn't see, and then the shatter twice again. And the hardest thing for me reading about her injuries was the conclusion from the pathologist that if my mummy had have received medical attention quickly, then she would not have died. Yet the British Army, they made her out to be some kind of an Annie Oakley who was running about firing at them. With one eye, half of her face missing, bullet wounds to her thigh and her hand. Do you see that smearing of my mummy's name? The British Army, they destroyed our lives. They murdered my mummy. And to this here day, No members of the security forces have ever been convicted of this. The RUC, they never took statements of the accounts that happened that night. And 40 years on, we are still waiting for the truth to be told.
Mrs. Murphy, your husband's injuries to his torso and groin caused massive internal injury, which led his kidneys to fail. He wasn't fit enough to operate on him, but now we must have the right people to act. So they amputated my father's leg. My grandmother stayed beside him the whole time. And exhausted on August the 21st, she came home to try and get some rest. August the 22nd, 1971, the hospital rang saying my dad had died. He died on my grandmother's 16th birthday. At his autopsy, the full extent to his injuries were revealed. My father would have lived if it hadn't really been that bullet wound. He would have lost his leg then, but he would have lived. Over the years, the families again and again have read. Everyone was shot with their backs facing the armies, trying to feel their safety. The post-mortem report showed this to be true. In complete contradiction to what we're told by the powers, they were not even worried in court, but were allowed to hide behind the letters of the alphabet. When our families, or loved ones, were branded gun men and women, they were not. And even 40 years on, we will not rest until the truth is told. My poor mother, she's destroyed, lonely, lost, lying in a wheelchair. And unlike me, she forgets the bastards who done this to my dad. But she too will like it to be told as a matter of justice, because we think this is the right thing to do.
By lunchtime on the 10th of August, 1971, word had spread across the Ballymurphy area of who had been shot dead and who had been injured. There was a sense of anger and fear, because people knew now that the British Army, and the powers in particular, would murder and maim and lie. So barricades were built high, stones were collected, anything and everything was brought into the area to keep the British Army out. Brian Faulkner, the Unionist Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, had been on television saying he'd requested the use of internment under the Special Powers Act to restore law and order. Now, the first British soldier shot was shot dead by the loyalist UVF on the Shankill Road. The first bomb exploded was at the Silent Valley Reservoir, and it was by the loyalist UVF. But yet internment was only brought to bear on the nationalist community. And in the first 36 hours of internment, the people of the greater Ballymurphy area had paid a huge price, and more was to come. Right, Billy?
Here, Eddie! Need your suit for the brag.
I did on.
What did you got the white rock?
I'm up checking our trees up. All right, Billy.
All right. Sent Marie and the kids down to our class, away from this mayhem.
Waste thing to do, Eddie. Sure, lots of kids, they've been sent down to the refugee camps in the south and our glass, wherever else you have to put them. It's like something out of the Second World War.
It is.
Only thing missing is a wee gas mask and the numbers pinned to their chests.
Here, gas mask wouldn't be a bad idea. You can hardly breathe, there's that much of it in the air. I'll tell you another thing, it's terrible for them kids' lungs. Here, Billy, that's some barricade, isn't it?
Well done! But it won't kick the army out. No. Not with the heavy equipment they have. Might slow them down though. Here, did you hear that bastard folk there in the telly?
He was coming on as I was leaving our trees. Here, she wanted me to stay and listen to him. I said, Teresa, see that? That's a cunt. I said, I don't even want to hear his voice. I said, if he comes on your TV, I'm putting my fucking boot through it.
A few months after Eddie was shot, I had to go to court to give evidence. They said I was a hostile witness because I was at the barricade that night. Me? Hostile? I said I wasn't the one with the rifle, hanging out of a digger, shooting a poor fellow in the back. Now I call that fucking hostile. This big warrant officer, he spoke on behalf of all the rest of the Brits. But I wouldn't be allowed to do that. No, I had to give my own evidence myself. Anyway, he swore in the Bible Eddie had been carrying a gun and had been firing at them. Like he made him out he was like Billy the Kid. Lying bastards. Only they didn't have the evidence to back it up. You see, they found no gunpowder in Eddie's hands. Only the residue of fish. Forgot to mention that. You see, Eddie's dad, or his wee sister, had given him a bit of fish for his dinner because his wife was up in our glass with the kids. Will they give Eddie's wife compensation? Buttons. It was an insult. The money to give that poor wee girl that wouldn't have fed her rabbit. Never mind her and her kids. The cheek of them, calling me a hostile witness. Bastards.
Already called up to see me that Tuesday, and he didn't want me to go into work because everywhere was in such an uproar. He'd been up to see if my daddy's okay, and even where I was planning, he said he can't get me. Daddy told me we could get one that day because everywhere was shut because of trouble. But he went down to our trees to see making some home brew, so he went down, but he wasn't offered, so God love him, he wouldn't have asked. But he hadn't had anything to eat that day, so our trees had made him some bread and jam and tea. It's just relief, you know. He was like a kid rubbing our glass, and he was happy that there was somewhere safe and quiet because everything was so bad that he didn't know it. Then your man Faulkner came on the TV to make a speech about the internment, but already said it was second until it was him. He wasn't interested in anything that man had to say. Marie told already to be careful. She did. Already was the life and soul of my family. He really was a lovely fella, I swear to God. He was a hard worker, he used to work in the corporation, and he used to tell me the corniest jokes in the world. Didn't drink.
told me he didn't need to drink to make him happy, he just was happy. He had his 3 wee boys and his wee girl and his Marie, his wife. Our Eddie left our trees, and 30 minutes later my brother was dead. He looked so lovely that day. He had his wee suit on, you see. Our Eddie used to wear these suits, because the job down at Corporate Station was a dirty out one, so he used to love to come home and get himself washed and changed, and God knows something smart. The newsletter said that my brother was a panther bomber on that barricade attacking those soldiers. And the BBC said he was a gunman. Gunman. All of this was disproven in court by forensics, but they didn't put that in the paper, no. No set in the record straight, no letter of apology, no nothing. The soldier stepped there. Right there. A proven liar and a cold-blooded murderer. But he walked away free as a bird anyway. After Eddie's death, nothing was the same. Eddie was everything! And after his death, Arnie would come down and torture Marie and the kids, rain the house, torment the children, saying to them, "Where's your Papa God? Forgive him." And my mummy went from being a really strong, able woman, someone I didn't even know anymore. You go missing, I'm go looking, I'm a finger, sitting in our Eddie's grave, just wanted him back. My mummy couldn't cope, and 7 years later she died. And his Marie died 9 years later of a heart attack at 38 years of age. Poor children left orphans. There were 6 of us, brothers and sisters, after our Eddie's death, and now there's only 2. Our love is devastated. And this is our aftermath.
Well, you baby, just let me down. Oh, yeah. Worst of all, you never come baby when you say you're not. But I love you so I do. More than your daughter. John! From the start.
What are we doing? Careful where you're doing my head.
Do we sound like I'm playing hot dog here now?
I dream on. If your mates want you at the door,
I
say to them.
do. More than your daughter. You know help from the start.
No fault is dead. No fault is dead, John. Come here. What do you mean no fault is dead? I mean the Brits shot him, John. The Brits killed him, slaughtered him. I missed Holly on Father Nolan and others last night. Where this happened? First shot Father Nolan in Springfield Park where he lives. And they killed Miss Conley in Springfield Road. John, just look outside. Look at the black flags. That should be proof enough. No fault is dead. I had a fucking thing beyond me. I mean, I had a fucking thing to all my people for nothing. They're fucking bastards.
I don't know, John. Look, everyone has black flags in the day. You better make one. Come on.
Right.
to myself more. That would be the last time we ever see our John. I'd give anything to hear him sing again. He was a lovely fella, honest to God. Played the guitar. On the cellar was always brute. Loved to do now getting horses with our Terry. We used to tell our Terry the horse was lost and it hadn't. Not our Terry away with my gone. But you couldn't have rode with our John. He always made you laugh. So it was hard to keep up your anger. He was 6 foot tall, tan, and these beautiful big brown eyes. Our photos don't do him justice. These big mad laughs, really loud that it would have made you laugh. He worked out in the corporation, and he blew the meat. And then this one day, right, he went from the terminal over shirts and hats on sale, where he was all busy with himself, till he tried them on, because he had these big long arms, the shirts only come halfway up his arm, and he couldn't have brought them back. So our Terry got to that. Jesus, he was sick as a part about that. That night, our Terry was stopped by the forest. And they beat him very, very badly. He was tortured, as many men were at that time. But our John, nobody knew where he was. In fact, nobody really knows what happened to my brother that night. But the soldiers, they said they shot 2 men who were armed and firing at them. One with a machine gun and the other with a pistol. The soldier said that our John returned fire and ran away. But the post-mortem report of my brother's body indicates that he may have been lying face down on the ground when he was shot. And they shot him twice. Second bullet entered his body through the back of his leg, high up in the thigh, and travelled horizontally right up through his body, ripped through his kidneys, stomach, spleen, perforated his bladder, intestines, ripped through his lung, and exited his chest. That second bullet was my brother's death. I heard her mother and father. They were frantic when they realised the boys were missing. For over 38 hours they searched everywhere for them. It was Thursday the 12th of August before they found out that our John was dead and that Terry had just been beaten and thrown into a barracks. We were in the refugee camp on the 13th of August. I walked into the Red Cross office and there was my sister Sue sitting there and she was sobbing her heart out. And I said to her, "What's wrong?" And then the priest said to me, "Your brother John is dead." All the way home I thought they were wrong. I thought our John would be sitting there laughing that big loud laugh at us because we all thought he was dead. But when I got to the Aunt Julia's house, she showed me the dead column in the Irish news. They didn't get his body back until 14th of August. Then he was taken straight to the chapel. After his funeral came out, there was all the bricks, all lined up and down Ballymurphy Road, all grinning at us. John's funeral was a blur to me. All remembering that Daddy was shouting at the bricks, and he was crying sore. You know, like, day after day, we rang the courts to get anything on our John's death, a post-mortem report, anything. Should have just passed on to somebody else, or he'd stand in a hallway or sit in an office for months, years. We demanded that paperwork, and eventually, we got it. And I read how my brother John died. The awful truth. This wasn't some television death. It was raw murder!
People said my daddy, Joseph Core, was an unusual and rare man because he was one of only a few Catholics who had a skilled job at Shorts and Harland and Wolff.
He worked the night shift and got on very well with all his work colleagues. He would come home from the night shift and put on porridge for the kids and then help my ma get them ready for school. He would only get a few hours sleep and then he was back up again to help me with my window cleaning business. My mummy, Eileen Court, hated it. Always complained that he worked too hard. But the thing is, my mummy and daddy had 7 children, the youngest being only 4 months old at that time. My daddy wanted a good quality of life for his family. And every year we had a holiday at Butlins and rented a cottage at Carlingford. We were also among the very few families in the area who owned a television set. That night, August the 11th, my daddy and me went up to Dermot Hill because he said he could see something going on. Initially, he thought it was an attack by loyalists, but in fact it was an attack by the British Army. When the shooting started, we got separated. And the next time I saw my daddy was in the hospital. My daddy was shot at the bottom of Dermot Hill, but he died 19 days later in the Royal Victoria Hospital. The army came down Dermot Hill shooting at the crowd, and that's when he was shot. He was shot in the middle of the road. 2 soldiers lifted him onto the footpath from where he crawled into number 207. But there was a pregnant woman there he was frightening, started screaming. So my daddy managed to crawl up to number 205, where 2 young fellas, the Doyle brothers, tried to help him. But the army burst in and arrested the 2 young lads, dragging them out into the middle of the road. They were thrown in the back of a sarsen and taken up to Girtwood Barracks on the Antrim Road, where they were tortured. One was 17 years old, and the other was only 13. 52 other men were arrested along with them. My daddy was still alive when they put him in the back of the sarsen. My mummy searched for 3 days trying to find him. He was underground in the military wing of Musgrave Park Hospital. When my mummy eventually got to speak to him in the presence of a police officer, he was at that point still able to speak, and he even asked about Joseph Murphy. In the days that followed, my daddy's condition deteriorated. The doctor at Musgrave Park Hospital advised the army not to move him, but he was flown by helicopter to the RVH. During the flight, he started hemorrhaging from the liver. The next day, my mummy took me up to see him, and we were told that his condition had improved slightly and we should just go home. But we were barely in the house when my Uncle Paddy Kearney, arrived to tell us we needed to get back to the hospital quick. When we got back, we were told my daddy had died. Once again, another man had been shot in the back. And once again, the papers were told that 2 gunmen had been shot as they fired at soldiers. On the morning of my daddy's funeral, a letter from some of his work colleagues at Shorts arrived saying, "May your subhuman husband and his pals roast in hell." Harassment and abuse of this kind continued for months because of the story in the paper that my daddy was an IRA gunman. My mummy went to court twice to try and clear his name. Even the judge was moved to ask the soldier, if Joseph Core was a gunman facing you, then why are all his wounds to his back? Of course, my daddy's name has never been cleared. Our family standard of living plummeted after that. We had to move into a smaller house. My mummy had to work full time to try and keep us, leaving the burden of care of the children to my younger sister Eileen, who was only 9 years old. 3 of my brothers died prematurely. Sean, Redmond, and Kieran. They all had problems due to the fact that they had been left without a daddy. You know, the funny thing is, about a year before this terrible tragedy happened, my mummy and daddy had planned to emigrate to Australia.
What's your name, Paddy? Paddy, you're trying to be fucking funny. My name is Paddy. What are you doing, Paddy? What's it look like I'm doing? You're not doing any work. Get your round cart and fuck off. Look, what? Oh, the young mothers and babies in these houses. We can't get to the shop because I'm not ready. They depend on my deliveries and I'm good at deliveries. I always do. I'll see you, Dean. I'm only delivering milk. Go off when you're fucking rude, Paddy. Bang! There. I said, leave him, I'll see you. Go ahead! Fuck! Oh! I'm not even part of your shit! He's not doing no shit, no lie! No! When? Praising kids! Now fucking pure not mad! No!
Oh, Jesus Christ, stop it! Stop it! Oh, no,
I don't see how he's done it, he's shot. He looks like he's had a heart attack. He needs an ambulance to see him away from him now.
Here, Ronnie, no, the types not coming out there.
No, be careful of the word. Fuck you!
Jesus Christ!
You! Who get the ambulance? That's the rest of you two come. Fuck off!
He's there, Dave.
Go, fuck!
Please stop it! Paddy McCarthy died of a heart attack. He was pronounced dead on his way to the hospital. You see, Paddy was an Englishman, but he lived and he worked in Ballymurphy. He was one of the first people to establish a youth club in that area, and see that youth club? It became like a refugee camp for all the families being put out of their homes. And you see, Paddy was actually aware of the shortage of bread and milk, and people not being able to get to the shops because of the curfews. He was only trying to ensure the families had milk that morning, and Jesus, you would have heard him shouting in the streets, milk for babies! And his treatment by the British Army, their slowness to allow medical aid to get to him quickly, caused his premature death, as surely as if the house died.
Chapel door's locked. Can't get it open. Maybe they forgot about the funeral.
Don't be daft. The army's all over the place. They're probably just having trouble getting here.
I know. They're looking over us right now. I don't like standing here in the open like this when I'm staring at us.
Here's Mr. McCarr now. All right, Mr. McCarr.
What's up?
We can't get the chapel door. And that funeral today, that wee lad Sean.
Sean McCarr.
Hey, Sean.
The Sean, and the wee one that drowned. We think the priest might have forgot with all the shooting and what will happen to Father Mullen.
No, they would not forget. They're just delayed. The army is stopping everyone, searching everyone. Don't worry. I'll get you in. It's not locked, it's just stuck.
Good. Hurry up, mate. Feel like a target stand here.
Just give me a wee minute. There's nothing to worry about. You're going into the chapel.
Alright, dead on, mate. They shot a priest the other night. Sooner I'm in there, the safer I'm free.
There you go. Now, wait, we're inside. I'll fix the door after the funeral mass. I'll just go and get some tools.
Oh my God, Paddy! Where's the dog? Oh my God! Come in the corner! The black one! Hey, Sean! Quick, son! Go for an ambulance! Quick, and try!
What's happened here?
One of your men has shot this man for nothing!
Nonsense! He was carrying a weapon. Even I could see there's something wrong with the sleeve of his jacket.
What are you talking about? This man only has one arm. He lost his other arm in the war. He's a soldier, a British soldier, but unlike you, he's a hero. Now, could you stop pointing that at us? We're trying to help this man. We're fighting intimidating.
Right. All my men will take care of him. We'll get him to hospital.
You're taking him nowhere. We know what you're doing to him in the barracks. We have an ambulance on the way.
There's no need, Father! We're taking this man!
John, what happened here?
They've shot him and he's in a bad way.
Father, you try to take this man to hospital, and this woman here, this bitch right here, refuses to let her fucking take him!
Tell you what, you bastard!
Stop it! Right, you will not take this man! You have done enough.
John McCurr was born in Scotland, but when both his parents died, he came to live with his aunts in Antrim Road. He met his wife Murray and had 8 kids. John trained to be a carpenter with KS McDonald. You know what? He was a World War II veteran. As he during his service in the war, he damaged his hand so badly that it had to be amputated, but he trained himself to use his left hand and adapted his false hand to hold tools. He was so skilled at this that he was taken on by the McDonald Company and successfully served his time as a carpenter. Then he went to work for Corpus Christi Chapel as a maintenance man, dedicating, skilled, resourceful, hard worker, you name it. He was a very sensible man too. He used to bring friends back to his family home for me. My John was a character, alright. Did you see that day he was shot? His wife asked him not to go into work because everywhere was so dangerous, but of course he said he'd be alright, and if anything happened, he would go and stay with his friends. So when he did come home that night, sure, she just thought he was just She found out about her husband being shot when her daughter read in the paper that a William McCurr had been shot by Baron at the Army Night. The name given was wrong. The address book of the McCurr's in Andytown, so the family were confused, just hoped and prayed it was a mistake. And then the policeman at her door brought her down to the hospital because they wanted to clear up the matter of the unidentified man. Sure it was her John, alright. You know, he lived for 9 days after that. After his death, Mrs. McCurr was left destitute. The British Army widow's pension that he was entitled to, for the loss of his hand in his service during the war, was not paid because the allegations made that he's a gunman. Disgusting. A poor woman was left to look after 8 kids without any aid whatsoever. John McCurr was only 49 years of age when he died that day.
At the inquest of Father Hugh Mullen and Frank Quinn in February 1972.
I wish to recall Mr. Harvey to the stand, Your Honour.
Mr. Harvey to the witness stand, please.
Mr. Harvey, you have already been sworn in this morning. May I remind you that you are still under oath. You may proceed.
Mr. Harvey, you gave evidence this morning, very detailed evidence, and I apologize for having to ask you to take the stand again, but there are just a few things that I wish to go over, just to clarify. You don't mind.
Far away.
Just to recap, you claim you witnessed the shooting of Father Mullen, Francis Quinn, and...
Bobby Clark. The other man who was shot was Bobby Clark. And sir, I don't claim. I was there, I was also shot. I have the scar still.
Quite. Now, you did not live in Springfield Park, so why were you there?
My sister-in-law rang my wife in an awful state. She was terrified. A mob was outside her house rioting, bricks through the window. I went up to help her and her family get out of there, to bring them to safety.
Very noble of you. Now, you say rioting was taking place and several homes were attacked. You also, in great detail, describe the gunfire you heard. Indeed, you claim to be able to recognize the sound of various weapons. Is that so?
That's correct. When I arrived, it was just rocks, etc. being thrown at the houses. A riot between Protestants pushing in from Spring Martin and Catholics trying to push them back to stop them from wrecking the houses. There was also the sound of rubber bullets and gas canisters being fired. Then I heard small arms fire. I shouted to the crowd to get out of range of the shots, to get the women and children, and if they had any sense, themselves out of range. I then led my sister-in-law down to Moyard and told her to run. I went back to help the others. But then the sound of the gunfire changed. It was the British Army opening fire. I could hear the crack of a high-velocity SLR. I shouted to the others to get down, to be still. But people got scared and ran.
Bobby Clark got hit. He fell beside me. Then I got hit. And then Father Mullen...
Quiet. We heard this all this morning, Mr. Harvey. What I want to know is how you knew it was the British Army firing just from the sound. It seems an extraordinary gift you have.
I saw the army when I was up the street. They are issued with the SLRs. No one else has them. In fact, no one in that field had a weapon of any kind. It has a distinct sound because of how it operates.
Oh, and how does it operate? You reload and fire like a sniper rifle, yes?
No. You have a magazine in it, right? The breech blocks unslide. When you fire the bullet, the gases from the explosion go down the barrel up to a tiny hole and push a piston back. That piston pushes the breech block back, lifts in another bullet, and when the breech block comes forward, it's ready to fire again. That takes, 2.5, 3 seconds.
Well, it seems you know an extraordinary amount about weapons. Do the British Army know you are so, how should I put this, so familiar with all things to do with guns?
Yes.
They do?
Yes.
And you were not arrested nor questioned after the gun battle?
There was no gun battle. No one in that field had a gun of any type whatsoever. I was there. I saw and heard everything.
Are you suggesting that the British Army shot a priest and an unarmed civilian in cold blood?
I'm not suggesting anything of the sort. I'm telling you as a fact. The Powers murdered Frankie Quinn and Father Mullen, wounded Bobby Clark and myself, and left us lying in that field for hours. There was no gun battle, no crossfire. No one in that field had any weapons. We were all shot from behind by the British Army. Did you get the ballistics report?
Yes.
Were all the bullets in the dead high-velocity rounds?
You are not here to ask questions, but to answer them.
Mr. Harvey, may I say that I am disgusted by your allegations of murder against members of Her Majesty's Armed Forces. The British Army is the best trained army in the world, and the Parachute Regiment is the cream of that army. I shall be recommending that the RUC interview you about this knowledge of armament you have, and you will cooperate. Do you have any objections to that?
None. In fact, I will tell you right now, Your Honour, how I know so much about weapons of the British Army. Because I was a British soldier myself, home on demob leave at the time these murders happened. I was in the Royal Engineers. I was still an active soldier at the time these murders happened. I also trained in armoury.
That will be all, Mr. Harvey. We have no further questions for you. Thank you.
But that's why...
That will be all, Mr. Harvey. You may go.
Oh yeah. They wanted me off that stand, all right. Then the 4 Powers who were in the court followed me out into the hall. 3 privates and a sergeant. Started shoving me around. Told me I was a fucking traitor. I'd be dead within a month. About a month after that, I was picked up by the Powers and thrown in the back of a sarsen. They drove me up the Shankill Road and threw me out shouting, "Here's a Fenian bastard for ye!" I was shit scared, but I didn't run. I stood there and forced myself to smile, to laugh. A few men from the Shankill Road grabbed me. "Fuck me, mate, steady on." I took my demob papers out of my pocket. I always carried them with me. Them fuckers are having a laugh. I'm just demobbed home to get married. Bastards thought it'd be funny to fuck me out here. They believed me. Brought me into a pub. Bought me a drink. I couldn't wait till I get out of there. In case you think I'm lying, I went straight to the authorities and they had charges against those soldiers. It's all on record. The sergeant in charge got busted down a private, and 2 of the privates were sent to Colchester, the glass house, for a month. British Army prison. A full, formal complaint on the record for anyone to check, to go and see. It wasn't because I was brave I did that, but because I knew they were throwing me out on the Shankill Road, hoping I'd be butchered. They had already got away with murder, and now they wanted to silence me. But they didn't. And the truth will come out.
motion to internment, the commander of the British Army went on television and said, internment had been a great success.
Sure, that was about as truthful as Tony Blair's weapons of mass destruction statement, wasn't it? However, years later, another head of the army acknowledged that internment had been a disaster that had changed the face of the troubles here in the north. Well, that was an understatement. It scarred the faces and the hearts and the souls of the nationalist people of the north, and will be remembered by them forever. It is part of the history of British and Unionist aggression against one section of this community. But here in Ballymurphy in West Belfast, it is not history. What happened then is very much a part of everyday life for those families. The scars have not healed. The wounds are still raw, and the pain and the hurt has been passed down through the generations. Now, these stories have been meticulously put together by the sons and daughters and brothers and sisters of those murdered and those wounded. They have struggled for 40 years, fought with bureaucracy for the release of information that should be easily available. I mean, why should medical reports or autopsy reports of those killed be classified, be top secret? If those 11 people were gunmen and in one case a gunwoman, surely it would be in the interest of the state to make that public for all to see. It would confirm for once and for all the truth about what happened. But now we have that information. Tonight, you people got to see and hear those stories. The autopsy reports of the injuries and the bullet wounds that do not fit the evidence given by the paratroopers who fired those shots. The same paratroopers who were allowed to hide their identities at the coroner's court and who are still to this day given the protection of remaining anonymous. And the dead had their names and addresses splattered over every newspaper and every news report, leaving those families to deal with the hate mail, the threats, the abuse, and the stigma. Frank Quinn's family had to leave their home in Stranmillis because of those news reports. His wife left at 19 with 2 wee babies. Joe Corr, a skilled worker in Harland and Wolff, left a big family struggling to survive. You know, there was one thing that struck me when I first heard these stories, and it's this. Every single one of those men killed that night had a job. And that was extraordinary, given the rate of unemployment at that time. Sure, if I was to walk into Ballymurphy tonight and pick 10 men at random off the street, you'd be lucky if 4 of them had a job. So, not only had those families to deal with the awful deaths, but with the grinding poverty that came about because a breadwinner had been erased, murdered. People don't think of that side of things. And a murder's only a 9-day wonder in the press. But in each of those families, a huge shift occurred. The Connolly family, whose father already suffered from a severe heart problem, depended heavily on their mother. And when she was shot, poor Mr. Connolly fell to pieces, had a complete breakdown. And that wee family was left adrift. Children left to rear their siblings. forced to leave school at an early age in order to get a job and go out and bring money in. That was the most important thing in each of those households. Now, I've spoken to all those family members, and they're bright, intelligent, articulate people. And you wonder what they could have become, what they could have made of their lives if they had been allowed to finish their education. But they weren't given those choices. Those choices were taken away from them over those 3 nights in August 1971. 57 children whose lives were altered forever by the squeeze of a trigger, and nothing was done. Now, I believe that had the facts have been known then and made public, that the killings a few months later of Father Fitzpatrick and those shot with him may not have happened. And I believe that if those paratroopers who fired those shots had been charged, been held to account for their actions, then Bloody Sunday in Derry may not have happened. But sure, right up to last year when the Savile report came out, the authorities in Derry denied everything, took no responsibility for Derry. But the people of Derry did not let go, and neither will the families of those murdered in Ballymurphy. People say you should move on. It's in the past. It is not. It is a wound ever present in each of those families to this very day. A wound won't heal unless it's treated properly. A wound won't heal if it's infected. A wound will only heal if justice and truth are applied. And the truth costs nothing.